Now, what I had been talking about the other days, the community building, the academic, the scientific community, um, the isms, is all at the end all about knowledge. We should not forget it. It's not a goal and aim in itself, but an end in itself, but it's really about knowledge and how to obtain knowledge. Now, this had been always a problem, challenge, and is even more so today. The reason for this, that it is getting more difficult, is I refer to Heisenberg here, the uncertainty principle. And what he wrote is, object of research is no longer the nature itself, but it's man's investigation of nature. So we have this interference that is actually interesting for us, and that makes it more difficult to understand what reality is about. This had been the same, very much the same, always throughout history of mankind, but it is getting more prevalent as much as we are now going to interfere and to reflect on this interference and do something, consciously use this. Now, the term knowledge as such is not completely without problems. Especially today, when we always talk about knowledge society and have this idea of the entire society, everything that we are doing is characterized by knowledge. What is knowledge? And I'm afraid, and this is why I problematize the term a little bit, what I think we face today is a wrong use, a misuse, abuse even of this term, that we are talking about knowledge, but that we are actually meaning skills. Skills, something more or less mechanical, and that we understand knowledge with this as well in a utilitarian way, of something that is used and that is only there to be used, referring to an immediate aim. Fulfilling the aim, that is the gain, and not the game as such is important. This makes or allows us for an interesting shift, that we can say as well that knowledge is a commodity that is in some way anti-capitalist, that it is a commodity that is anti-commodity, it's against the commodity character. One point with this is that the value of knowledge does not diminish with the use of knowledge. And this leads to the second point. Actually, knowledge, the value of knowledge, increases by its very use. For this, of course, we have to understand knowledge in a broader way, in a way that allows us to speak of knowledge as a game, as a playful advance to nature, not taking nature as something that we have to exploit, but nature as something of which we are part. What is nature? What is knowledge in this context? Fitch wrote a book about poetry and knowledge, and looking for the unity that can be achieved by achieving true knowledge. And he was referring to poetry as part of the knowledge, as an important point that is relevant in linking this objectivity, this utilitarian approach to knowledge, linking it to the entirety, linking it to something that is whole, that is an entity, that it is a unit. Now, Fitch was one of these people working on it. Famous was Snow actually doing this, looking at two cultures. And it is interesting to see what he actually wrote on the loss of two cultures, saying, in our society, we have lost even the pretense of common culture. Persons educated with the greatest intensity we know can no longer communicate with each other on the plane of their major intellectual concern. This is a serious for our creative, intellectual, and above all, our normal life. It is leading us to interpret the past wrongly, to misjudge the present, and to deny our hopes of the future. It is making it difficult or even impossible for us to take good action. It is again the two cultures that he has in mind, or that he looks at, the contradiction, we may even say, the counterposition of different kinds of knowledge. Not understanding it as an integrity, but understanding it as different parts, as different cultures, as something we should know, but we don't really know. And this is something that actually pesters us in our achievements, or in our efforts to achieve something when we are working as academics, as scientists. Now, there seems to be something that is interesting, and that seems to be as well a contradiction. Talking on the one hand of knowledge, about knowledge, and talking about the pure knowledge, if you want, not the pure reason, but a similar kind of knowledge for the sake of knowledge, we are as well misled. Because there is no such thing as knowledge, as pure knowledge, that is not derived, that is not linked to practice. And practice is always social practice, practice within society. And this is one of the major splits actually we face today when we are looking, or when we are talking about knowledge. The difference, on the one hand, we are using knowledge in a technical sense, looking at it in terms of applicability. And at the same time, although split from this, we are looking at something that tries to understand this world. The measurement of the world, with Gauss on the one hand, the mathematical knowledge, and with Humboldt on the other, the understanding, the diving into realities, and trying to get the unity of it. Now, this is insofar a problem that actually, and this is kind of forbidden to acknowledge, forbidden to look at, that this knowledge is something that is linked to split practice, to the antagonism of praxis in a society that is characterized by the difference, by the contradiction between different classes. Knowledge is not and cannot be neutral. Even this pure knowledge cannot be neutral in such a sense that we do not understand and accept contradictions. Contradictions are contradictions in praxis. Contradictions are there in terms of different interests. These interests are not values as such, although we frequently link it to the question of values. But these questions are the differences, the contradiction is between interest in the way of producing and reproducing our daily life. A very simple matter, historical materialism always emphasizing this as the core of obtaining of knowledge. Even if it is the most abstract things, it is about this. And there I come back now to only briefly to the Heisenberg, saying it is not about nature as itself, but it is about man's investigation of nature. It's how we approach it, which means how or what do we want to do with the knowledge? Do we want to have a critical approach to this reality, allowing us to develop from there a critical praxis? Or do we have an affirmative knowledge, an affirmative way of understanding our environment, making possibly here and there some little repairs, but accepting the ground rules? Robert Cox was working on this, explicitly distinguishing this. And this is, of course, something that we then have to apply in our daily work, that we have to apply in our daily work in order to move on. I just finished a work on human rights and looking for a fourth generation of human rights, saying there is, or it is extremely difficult to talk about universal human rights. This principle of universality cannot exist because there is no universal praxis. It depends on, of course, natural conditions, climate, and it depends as well on the social praxis we have. Now, this claim of universal human rights is very much a claim of capitalist human rights. It is not acknowledging that there is different praxis in life that is possible, that different society is possible, and that different world is possible. And there we would come to something like universal rights, that we say it is about the acknowledgement of difference in terms of production, of the mode of production, and then accepting difference. But as well, we have to look, and this is the major difficulty, we have to look at how can we go on and how can we move on, that then the rights are nowhere denied. This is on the one hand the so-called advanced rights in capitalist societies, in the so-called developed world, but it is as well the breach of rights in traditional societies, where we of course have this, and we cannot simply say, okay, let's work towards acknowledging those countries that are not capitalist yet. What we do is, instead of accepting and instead of addressing them here and there, we are trying to find something that is taking our standards of the so-called developed world and moving these countries towards this standard. IMF measures dictating what a successful economy is about. World Bank, the European Union does the same. Even within the so-called developed world, if you look at the recent developments, now I'm talking about a couple of years, in Greece, in Spain, and other countries, and amongst others, Italy is at the moment very much under pressure by this approach. Another thing, looking at universality and the difficulty of accepting it as a general principle, is a second work I'm doing now. It is about the economic side of digitization. Again, we have, of course, very important discussions there when it comes to digitization and the impact on working life, the impact on social security systems, the impact on employment. The question for me is, however, a different one. What happens to the mode of production itself? Are we moving towards an entirely new system where actually not only production, not only capital structures are under pressure? In one way or another, under pressure means that it is as well possible or thinkable that they are moving forward to progressive, more democratic, more emancipative direction. But it is as well also something where we have to think about the definition of value. Is value as well now redefined? We have the discussions on Ingelhardt, the change of values, the move towards hedonistic values and the move towards something that acknowledges social and societal values. But there is another thing to it, that value as such is as well taking a different stance in economic terms. This is, of course, and this is a little bit my problem in this current work, it's of course as well a matter of the labor theory of value. Can we still go on and use this labor theory of value, or is it obsolete that we actually have a shift, an objective shift towards marginality? I doubt that we have, but it is at least a question we have to ask and we have to be ready to answer. It is a question, and I think with a question it is time to leave it here now until the next time. So there we go.
De la fin du passé, faisons table rase, foule esclave, debout, debout. Le monde va changer de base, nous ne sommes rien, soyons tous. C'est la lutte finale, groupons-nous, et demain, l'international sera le genre humain. Il n'est pas de sauveur suprême, ni Dieu, ni César, ni tribun. Travailleurs, sauvons-nous nous-mêmes, décrétons le salut commun. Pour que le voleur rende gorge, pour tirer l'esprit du cachot, nous-mêmes notre forge. Battons le fer quand il est chaud. C'est la lutte finale. Groupons-nous et demain l'international sera le genre humain. Ces paroles qui trottent dans la tête des opprimés du monde entier sont celles d'un de nos poètes qui s'appelait Eugène Potier. Aujourd'hui, le monde a changé. Est-ce qu'il y a moins d'exploités, de chômeurs, d'enfants affamés, pour qu'on puisse se reposer, de chanter, de chanter, de chanter, de chanter. C'est la lutte finale. Groupons-nous et demain l'international sera le genre humain.